Kinky. Now, our guest is a very special guest. Her name is Kismet Marlene, and I really like the idea that it goes very well with Kinky Kismet, and I hope that's okay with her. But Kismet is a burner, a belly dancer, and an erotic blueprint coach. She has blended her creativity with her love of fitness, beauty, and authentic sexuality to create a unique business, making her own line of jewelry and apparel for the unconventional. Liquid Nymph Bondage Couture is a place where beauty meets strength. And you can reach her at coaching at liquidnymph.com. So, Liquid Nymph is also a website. So, you can go to www.liquidnymph.com and you will see so many beautiful, beautiful, beautiful colors. And actually, you're wearing some, aren't you? So, welcome, Kismet.
Hi, Diane. It's delightful to be here. I'm already super excited.
Yay. So you want to show us a little bit of what you're wearing? You want to maybe bring your screen down a little bit. Yeah. There.
So
perfect.
This one's actually not yet up on the site. This one is mine. And I haven't yet made it available. But what it is it's this is a collar. Like you can classify it as a bondage collar. This one is particularly like super soft leather and has a really kind of subtle closure. So it's a clasp that goes on like that.
From the front.
Yeah. This one's in brushed brass. This one I like to wear anytime I'm talking about my work, or if I'm with my partner, then like this is the piece of jewelry that I wear to kind of symbolize that aspect of like mindset that we're in. So here we are.
Awesome.
Talking about kink.
Thank you for sharing that because it's beautiful. Yes. So you are completely happy talking about the fact that you like to live a kinky lifestyle.
Yeah, it's just you and me here. So yeah, so like we can do that. And I know that there's going to be like other people secretly listening in, and
is that arousing?
It's very fun. Yes. Yeah, it's a thing that it's like, I understand why. I can see myself getting flushed and red. Did you see that just happen right there? That was, ooh.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that it's a thing that the more that we talk about it, the more that we start to recognize, I'm not weird, wrong, bad, broken. We're just, we're okay. And the more we can like speak our own desires, the better we understand our desires and communicate them to our partner. So it's something that we should be, if we want to talk about it, we should be talking about it. And if we want to keep it private, like you can do that too. It's your sex to play with. But I am here to answer questions and tell stories. So
yes, thank you.
Let's go.
I appreciate that. And I always say that there's no right and wrong. There's just what you feel, what you think, and what you desire. It's all good, right? And we're all different. Just like we like different kinds of chocolate. We might like different kinds of ice cream. We might like all kinds of different kinds of foods, and we can still live in the same world and be friends. And it's the same with our sexuality. So it really makes me sad when we see people feeling bullied or embarrassed or humiliated because of their desires. It just really bothers me. So, and this is one question that I'm really excited to hear your opinion on, because one thing that I've heard a lot of is that people think that if people like kink or they like pain, it's because they've been molested or they've been sexually abused or raped or something. And when initially we talked and I heard your story and I knew that you had like a beautiful childhood, I wanted people to hear it. I wanted them to know how you came to understanding that in your erotic being, you were kinky.
Yeah. Thank you. Ooh, let's see. Like where to begin?
Well, maybe start with what kind of childhood you had, what your parents were like.
My parents were great. As far as I am aware of, I experienced no sexual trauma, no physical, emotional, verbal, I didn't have any trauma like that. we didn't have necessarily like the perfect, situation going on. My father was sick when I was very young. He had a brain tumor. And so there were stressors in the house. But in terms of like how my parents parented me and like what I learned around or was treated, how I was treated around sexuality, I had no trauma, like
Right.
no abuse, I was never abused in any way.
Right.
Things I can remember, like being really young, I remember I had My Little Ponies and I had Barbies. And these ponies would do like terrible things to the Barbies. Like they were, yeah, like I don't even know exactly like how to say it, but there was definitely like an erotic element as a child. And I'm like, 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that, maybe even younger. Is how like I played with these very non-sexualized. I mean, I guess Barbie was sort of sexualized, but like ponies, not so much. I also wanted to say that like I was born in 1980, and I think that is significant just because it gives you a scope of what like maybe what I was exposed to. Right, we had basic TV. My parents did not believe in cable television, so we watched a lot of like Discovery Channel, not Discovery Channel, because that's cable, PBS.
Mhm.
Right, so there was like Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, and then like whatever was on, like Channel 11, Channel 5 when you get home from school. So I didn't have, and there wasn't porn in the house. um my parents were happily married to each other. There were never other people coming in the house. um so yeah, like where did I get like this notion of, like this is how my toys play with each other? I don't know.
Or
you
even the
know
notion of naughtiness.
yeah, the notion of naughtiness, I don't know, but there was definitely something naughty going on between the ponies and the Barbies.
I love it.
um and like thinking about, I thought a lot about, this is the thing I've been thinking about a lot lately, right? Like um like masturbation, right? Like when did that start? I can remember being on very long drives in the very back of the station wagon, right? Like my parents were up front and then my brother sat in like the back seat. And like when I got too like squished and restless, from being squished between my brothers, I would crawl into the very back of the Volvo station wagon. And there are times where like you figure that out when you've got to go pee on a road trip, right? I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but you're like, I've got to pee. And oh, if I apply pressure down there, now I don't have to pee quite so badly. And oh, that feels good. Right. And there was never any I imagine that my parents must have also, because like kids touch themselves, they play
Yeah.
with themselves. And how do God, just my heart goes out to parents and teachers. Like how do you manage like burgeoning childhood, just not even sexuality or eroticism yet, but just like the noticing of a body part that has extra pleasure, right? Because when you're really young, like that's not even tied to the notion of sex or the erotic or romance or another person. It's just like there's a body part that has pleasure. And I didn't grow up with any religion. I didn't grow up with any like sexual stigma around, like my genitals. And they probably just told me like, okay, don't do that here in front of everyone. Maybe that's a private activity. But whatever they told me, it it didn't leave me feeling like this was, wrong or dirty or that God somehow doesn't approve. Right? I
Mhm.
had none of that. So I feel
Okay.
extremely grateful, to have been able to just grow up in my body without, those kind of that kind of baggage.
Absolutely. Because tons of us have that, you
Yeah.
know, shame, guilt, for the way we look, the way we feel, for our pleasures, for our desires. Like, yeah, in my business, I see a lot of couples where one or both have different things that are impacting their sex life today. Those old stories are still in there. Like, we got to get rid of those, right? So, yes,
Yeah.
you were very, very, very lucky, very blessed. Yeah. So how did you discover though that like, so you talked about your little ponies and as you were growing up, but like at what point did you become this teenager or that you start to explore sex and you realized you didn't like things like other people?
Before I even started having sex, before I even started having, yeah, like any kind of intimate relationships with people, like yeah, just the fantasies that I had in my mind were already, like going down a kinky route. And I imagine there must have been some sort of seeding a little bit, like from like movies or TV shows or something. Like, do you remember Weird Science
Mm-hmm.
and Kelly LeBrock, right? Like
Don't
the
remember
robot,
that.
the perfect like robot woman that these two like geeky science, teenage boys made, right? Like
Okay.
they use science and computers to like create this, like goddess woman who's just like powerful but like intelligent, and there's like this one scene where she's like, well, we'll throw a party, right? And there was, like she's like, the usual whips, dips, chips, dips, chains, and whips, like, and just like her whole like demeanor about it. So, like I imagine that there must have been little hints of pieces of information that then I took into my own imagination and went from there with. But like they must have been like small fragments that
Mm-hmm.
that then blossomed in my mind, because again, like all of that is still happening pre-internet,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, yeah, this is all just developing in my mind with small seeds from whatever might have come in from what was accessible in culture then. And it's such a
Yeah.
different world today now, right? Like,
I
what?
know.
I
It
cannot
scares
even
me.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, because seeing sexuality before you're ready is actually very traumatic and it impacts everything in your brain, in your nervous system. So it is scary. So
Yeah.
okay, so you got to being a teenager though,
Mm.
and what were your like first sexual experiences like? Did they have any normalcy or you know, where did you find your partners and how did they find it that, you had these different types of ideas?
Let's see, the first person, so like I think it was, well, so like somehow at some point like I got pretty gothy, like just because well, for one, I knew that like whatever this mass culture is and didn't feel like a place that I wanted, that felt like resonant with me. One, it was like too big and too bold and too everything else. And I really did like, like gothic or just darker fashion. And I think in a way that also like kept certain people away from me. Like, you don't want to talk to this goth girl. You just don't. Like I got a banner on how I be, so don't even bother. And I think immediately my look was a filter for a lot of people in a lot of ways, which was good because I didn't want a lot of um, interaction, because I'm actually pretty introverted.
So you didn't
uh,
like attention too much.
Not really. And which is funny because then I look, like in a way that completely stands
Yeah.
out, but I look in a way that completely stands out that also isn't inviting to talk to.
Okay.
Right. So I was totally self-expressed, or mostly self-expressed, and like, this is how I like to look. And if that also means you don't talk to me, cool. I've got like the people that I know really well. There's an idea, like one of these concepts of like just how we be in relationship is called a demisexual. And it's somebody who, the definition of that means that it's someone who takes a long time they have to have some sort of established relationship with someone before, like romantic or erotic feelings start to arise. You want to know
Right.
someone, you've got something going on already. So yeah, like I think my first relationships were with people at school. I remember the first person I ever kissed was actually my best friend at the time, who was a girl, and she was very interested in that, and I was like, okay, we can try that. And and it was like a not excellent kiss. And but I was like, huh, if this is what kissing is about, I don't know if I'm into it. Right. You know, like, but like we're both like 15 and figuring it out or something.
Right.
And then I remember there was some awkwardness about that afterwards, of like her wanting to engage with that again and me being like, no, I don't think so. um yeah, like my first, real boyfriend, was definitely, so I knew that I was also like, I like to be, like sexually submissive. And I like
Okay.
to be, how I'd like to put it now is, I'd like to be lovingly bossed around, directed,
Okay.
you know? And so there was like the first relationship I got into was horrible. I mean, this was okay, like at the beginning, but we're both like 15, right? Like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
So is he
Um,
bossing you around or what? What was
oh,
horrible?
oh yeah, like, it became emotionally abusive, like really
Oh, okay.
emotionally abusive. Yeah, and it had to do with like infidelity.
At
And
15.
at 15, because I had had
Wow.
cyber sex with somebody, because AOL chat rooms were a thing, and he found
Oh,
like a record of it on my like computer, and then came at me. And so he used that
right.
as a manipulation point, so anytime he would be shitty to me in some sort of way, I'd be like, that was shitty and that hurt my feelings. He'd be like, well, you know what hurt my feelings? When you did da, 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 da. Right. And so like he had this, this card
This
he could
thing
pull
over
like
you.
anytime. And it's interesting because there was also like a part of me that like really bought into like, oh, well, I deserve to be punished, I deserve that abuse. And so then I would even like, so this goes into like existential kink, right?
Right.
Like
So
if
did this
Mhm.
arouse you? This punishment type of thing?
Maybe, I think there was a piece of that, like that was somehow in there. But then there was also just really like rough kinky sex that went along with it. And so
Right.
like then like those pieces like made sense, you know. Yeah. And yeah, like it's
So did
interesting.
it surprise you that you liked rough, kinky sex?
No, that was what I was going for. Like I
So like, are you
knew that
talking
like,
rough, like hitting you, tying you, choking you? Like what do you mind if I ask you
yes,
these things?
yeah,
Okay.
yes, all of that,
Okay.
all of that. And it just happened to be that also what in like in my first relationships, what came along with that also came along with a lot of emotional,
Negativity, yeah.
verbal abuse. There was never any physical abuse or sexual
Right.
abuse, because all of that, was like consensual. All
Right.
of
And
that
turning you
aggression,
on. Okay.
yes,
I got
yeah,
it.
yeah, all of that
But
aggression was
outside
totally
the
consensual.
bedroom and stuff, he didn't treat you well.
Right,
And that was the problem. Okay.
right,
So
yeah.
so then, and I'm going to ask this because it might be going through other people's heads since it's going through mine. So you can enjoy like a happy life where you have a positive partner and you treat each other with respect and dignity and you're very tender and kind to each other, but in the bedroom it's like you're flying around and you're hitting and scratching and taking out the whips.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. And it really, um and it's changed a lot, right? So now here I am 25 years later, and through the evolution of many relationships, and each relationship is its own unique thing, because
Yeah.
you're that person, they're that person. You have a certain knowledge base and skill set, and you're coming in with whatever patterns you've got,
Yeah.
right, and expectations and all of it. And yeah, so like I had a relationship right like that. The second one after that was also like very like rocky. The next one, I actually was with somebody who was, in the BDSM scene. I was a dominant who was 10 years older than me at the time. So I was like 20, he was 30. And that was very much, like, all right, we're really talking about, like consent and, like desires. And like, there was a lot more like direct communication of what that would be, like, and his role, like a clearly like stated role of like, this is what you can expect from me, and this is what I expect from you,
Right.
as he's saying to me.
So
And
I have a question about that. Like we did talk about that a little bit in my other shows, but not really in detail. So I'm just wondering, what kind of arrangements do you have? Like what kind of role, what kind of boundaries would you have as a submissive? And then what about the dominant? Because we were talking how important it is to set a good container and to clearly know what's going to happen. But like we didn't talk about what that could be. So could you give us a little bit of some ideas in case somebody here is thinking they might like to try it, which I did tell them they should read the Enzo by Orpheus Black. And I think Viv had recommended another book. Don't just go out and do kink, right?
yeah, get educated,
Yeah.
definitely get educated on it, and maybe start with like, we'll start with a lot of conversation. There's, I think kinkacademy.com is a thing. I haven't actually
Oh,
looked at it. There are like, if you really want to get into dominance, then like, or both of you, like whoever you are, like seek professionals, and there's also community out there. So there's BDSM communities, both online, more online in this current moment, but,
right.
like going to dungeons and things and checking that out. If you go to a dungeon, like it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to play. Like my experience with dungeons was with that partner, that first, like, bona fide, that's not the right word, but we'll say he's the bona fide dominant, right? And
Okay.
he'd had a lot of experience with the kink scene at that point.
Okay.
And we'd go to dungeons and I'd be like, I don't know, I mean, this is kind of fun to be like exhibitionist, and he really enjoyed the community there, and that gave him a
So
lot. But I
we
was
have
kind of
not
like,
talked about
uh,
dungeons. So could you
uh,
explain or give us the scene of what a dungeon would look like? If I was to go there and I've never been to a dungeon, what would I be seeing?
depends on the dungeon for one. But
Okay.
so one thing you will not see and won't be happening there is sex, right?
Oh,
Like most
okay. So
dungeons,
no
like
sex
that's
in a
off the
dungeon.
table.
Okay.
Correct. Typically,
Okay.
typically. And that might actually vary by state to state, but in California, like, no. And especially if it's like, so you could go to a dungeon and just like, I'm going to rent this type of room in the dungeon that maybe has certain kinds of equipment in it. So
Okay.
it might have like a big wooden X on the wall where it's got like tether points, so you could tie someone up with their hands up like this and their feet at the bottom. um Other furniture might be that there's a thing that you can be bent over and then spanked. Maybe there's stocks, or your head's in the thing, and the
Mm.
thing like you're at the Renaissance fair and people are gonna, like, whippings in the center square because you were a terrible, you stole something, or whatever the game is. So there's lots of equipment at a dungeon. So that might be a reason. That might be one reason why you would choose to go to a dungeon. One, because of the equipment. You don't have
Okay.
that kind of stuff at home, right?
Okay.
Two, in a dungeon, you can find professional dominants and professional submissives. And in that way, then you've got somebody who's a professional, who's been trained by that, who has lots of experience with that, and have this conversation of, this is the scene that I want to have. These are my boundaries. This is, these are the boundaries I want to have pushed in the way that I want them pushed. This is my safe word. Like if I say red, everything stops. If I say yellow, slow down and check in, right? So there's a lot of communication that happens, so before even any play starts, either in a dungeon, or like at your home, especially if you're new to it. Like if you've been doing things for a long time, then you might just flow right into it and you don't have to talk about anything, right? But that depends on the depth of the relationship, how well you know each other, how long you've been doing it, how comfortable, like, right? Like you already know what your boundaries and
Right.
everything are. Like if you have a solid container of like years of experience with each other set
Yeah.
up, right? But it takes time to get there. So initially there's, like a lot of conversation, talking about fantasies, talking about boundaries, talking about trauma, right? Like what are your triggers?
Right.
That's important to know, like really, really important to know.
Yeah, I could see
And,
that.
yeah. And so some people who have, a history of trauma use BDSM very, very deliberately, very consciously, very carefully and cautiously, as a way to actually integrate some of the trauma that they'd had maybe in other relationships or when they were young. And part of like a way to think about, how that works is that a trauma that you had at some point when, earlier in life, you didn't have control over, you didn't have choice over, you
So
didn't have
like
any say in it.
let's say somebody was grabbing you. Let's just use an example. I think it'll be easier for people. Let's say there was somebody who grabbed you every time they went by you, and it was traumatic to you. It was very disturbing. So how would you use that now in a BDSM scene?
Well, so in something like that, like if you set up the container of like, okay, like in this scene, I have this history. I want to unwire it, rewire it, so like, yeah, like let's say it was that, yeah, your partner grabbed a part of your body really aggressively in a particular way. And it really just, it reminds you of something that happened, that was traumatic when you were younger.
Right.
Right. So now if you go into a specific scene where it's like, okay, I'm consenting to you grabbing me in this way that I really do not like, but I also want you to do these things that I do like. I want you to, if I say red, like then you stop grabbing me.
Right.
And in that moment I have control, and maybe there's other parts of that scene where like you are consenting to like, grab me now, don't grab me now, right? And so like you have, you're still in
You have
control.
control, right?
Yeah.
I wonder too, like I've heard about BDSM being used as therapy, where like in the same kind of idea, somebody would set up the scene where they're going to be grabbed, but they're going to turn around and punch the person, or they're going to kick them, or they're going to fight them or bite them. And then it just helps them. They're going to go as much as they want, so that then it helps them to feel like they've taken back over that part of their life. Like it's like nobody's ever going to do that to me again because I can defend myself now. Like I've heard of stuff like that being used for therapy, and I thought, I could see that.
Yeah, and it's just really important that like you go to somebody who really knows what they're doing with it. Has knows what they're doing, has excellent referrals, lots of experience, maybe. Yeah. And especially if you're dealing with trauma, you really want to look at what this person's background, experiential background is, and educational background is.
Yeah, it's not something you just hop into. But you didn't have any trauma, so you just go in there out of choice because you like it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I like intense experiences. There's the idea of in dominance and submission. A dominant, like, or being in a dominant state of mind means outward focus, right? So like the dominant, even though they like they may be telling you they're telling you what to do, they are impacting you, they are applying pressure to you. The submissive may be in service to the dominant, but it's still also like the dominant is paying attention. Their focus is outside of themselves and on their submissive, right? And in the more submissive state of mind, it, like, yes, you are aware of like what your dominant is needing, but it's more internal. And so you can be in the experience of it. So like if the dominant is, like let's say performing, like let's say the dominant is flogging you, and in that moment, like the dominant is going like, ooh, I wonder if, like, are they liking this? Am I doing it right? Am I good enough? Like, do they like what I wear? Do I smell bad? Right? Like all of those thoughts are internal. And if a dominant is in that state of mind, then they are focused internally instead of being like, I'm aware of, what is this body in front of me doing? How are they responding? Like, what are the messages that I'm getting? Like, how is this strike landing? Is it landing in the right spot? All of these things. So there's an outward focus.
So it sounds like the dominant has a really serious, important job. They got to make sure not to hurt you or not to do something to you that's outside of what you've agreed upon.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
making sure you're going to be okay as you're doing this, because you might have said, I think this is going to help me, but what if your face or your body's saying a different story? I guess the dominant would have to notice that.
Yeah. And then it's
Right.
all like communication. And
Right.
sometimes there are places where you're not as, like as a submissive, there's a concept called subspace, right? Which is where you kind of go all the way out, or maybe, like way in. But whatever it is, you're less aware of like what, like how to interact with this immediate environment
Okay.
around you.
So
And
you're like
so,
in another zone.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the subspace. So you're, yeah, like in a
Okay.
different mental space. And yeah, and so in that place, if you're not able to, like really articulate your needs,
Mm-hmm.
is your dom, like actually noticing, can they, like to some degree, like as best they can, figure out what your needs are.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're very focused on you.
Okay. So I'm curious about something. Okay. We talked about you being a burner, and we're talking about being in dungeons and dominance. I'm thinking, is a burner something that has to do with kink?
It doesn't not. So a burner loosely just means somebody who attends Burning Man. So all of
Burning man?
this, Burning Man. Yeah,
I'm thinking
Burning
we're
Man.
burning men.
Not for the last 2 years. No, so okay,
Good.
so Burning Man is a
Okay.
huge like arts festival that happens out in the middle of the Nevada desert, just a couple
Okay.
hours outside of Reno. So it's a huge camping event, arts event. There's a kind of a lot of just counterculture, right? It's outside of the norm of, like what, yeah, like what general life is. Like you have to bring everything you need, like all of it. Um, like water, like there are porta potties there, and
That's
you can
it.
buy ice. Yeah, there are porta potties for you to use. You can buy ice. There are medical stations, like, so if you get hurt, there
Okay.
is medical care available for you. If you find yourself in a state of mind, either from just whatever intense experience you've had, or from, perhaps a psychedelic that you've taken, if you find yourself in a state of mental overwhelm, there are like quiet places, with people who are trained in this, who can like hold that space for you until you can ground yourself and like come back into, being with people again. So there's lots of resources that are available there, but like in terms of how you personally like survive out there, like you've got to bring it all, and then you
So
got to
is this
bring
sort of
more to
like
like
a
share.
kink festival?
There are, well, so how do you define kink?
Right. Well, kink, we've talked that kink is anything that's really different, like things that are different to you. So like if somebody, we talked about the examples, like if somebody has never had sex doggy style and they do it for the first time, that's kinky to them, right? So like for me, I've not explored any of the dungeons or anything. So just being in a dungeon would be kinky for me,
Yeah.
right?
So,
So,
so
like I'm saying, so if you go to one of these festivals, can you find a lot of alternative lifestyle? I think that's the better way to say it.
yeah, there's a lot of
Alternative
all.
lifestyle, sexuality or experiences or what? Like that
there
kind of
there
thing?
that is available there, but I would
Okay.
never classify the event as like, it is an arts event, it is music, it is
Okay, I see.
people, and then yeah, like there's an orgy dome. There are places where and all of that is managed rigorously, like with consent conversations, and
Right.
like a briefing, and like, do you understand what this actually is about in here? So it's not just like, there's more to it than what the name says. There are people who are hosting all kinds of workshops on kinky things, whether it be like rope bondage or flogging or pegging, like
Right.
fucking someone with a strap on. Like, so those things are there, and the community really likes the part of just like the overall community guidelines. Like consent is one of the biggest
Okay.
one of the biggest
So
things. So
it
yeah.
sounds like it's a festival of the art of being human. So any
Yeah.
form of art that a human could take part in is there.
Yeah. All kinds
So
of
it
stuff.
could be music, drama stuff, but it could also be in the sexual or erotic realm. Okay,
Sexuality, spirituality is
I
there. They've
got
got
you.
people who come out who talk on, like just like how to have a more how to reduce your carbon footprint,
Right,
right? Like how do we be a better human on this earth in terms of, yeah, it's
right.
all over the
Okay,
place. There's a lot available.
okay. All right. Well, that's pretty good. You've been pretty
Mhm.
open with us. So I'm really happy that you were able to answer these questions and be free and open. And I hope that people understood that kink is not like, or feeling like you want something different or you desire different things has nothing to do with right or wrong or that you're a good person or a bad person. Because I think Kismet's amazing. You should see, you don't know most of her. I've known her for a while now and I've witnessed some of her fitness and her dancing, and she's pretty incredible and at a lot of things. So, so just remember that. The one thing that I also want to end with, I'm going to give you a few minutes for this, is that if you didn't go to her website yet, liquidnymph.com, you need to go there because she has some of the most beautiful things there. So, do you want to talk to us a little bit about your business, Liquid Nymph?
Mhm. Yeah. So basically, as a kinky gothy teenager, I wanted bondage gear, but if you're under 18, you can't go into sex shops. So I would go to Candy Leather Factory, which is where the Boy Scouts would go and make their wallets and things. And I'm like, I want to make, like a leather wrist cuff that has these kind of rings. And they were like, sure. And they were super helpful. And so I started learning the, leather craft in 1997, and then I wanted it to be beautiful, right? Because there was plenty of, like butch leather daddy stuff out there. So I wanted stuff that was feminine, that was elegant, but that was also actually functional and strong and durable, but that had softness and style and something more to it.
Mhm.
So yeah, you can check out my website. Everything on there I do make myself from start to finish. If you see pieces where you're like, oh, I really like this from this and that from that, and can you make it, so that it's, it has, can you make this thing in purple with gold hardware? Like, probably. Like, it's all a conversation. And and then if you're like, oh, I've got this idea for this kinky thing, like, explain it and we'll see, because there's, yeah, like so much is possible. So yeah, I really specialize in doing really feminine and elegant, beautiful collars, cuffs, and leashes, chains, and body harnesses, and things like that.
Yeah, and she got gorgeous stuff. And she also has, and I'm going to mention this because a lot of people don't know where to find these, but if you're a squirter or your partner's a
Yes.
squirter, she has squirt pads and any size you want, you
Yeah.
just tell her and she'll fix them for you. They're beautiful. Oh, she sent me one. I should have brought it here to show you, but they're lovely. And
Mhm.
wait a minute, I'm going to
And
go
they're
get it.
black. Yeah. I'll talk for a sec. Okay. So yeah, the squirt mats are they're called Kismets. And they are like a super absorbent, really, really soft fabric. With a waterproof layer waterproof layer, and then like a backer fabric, and they're all fused together. So it's like one solid piece of fabric. Oh, she's got the colored one. That's right. So some of them
So,
are colored like this. And
yeah.
then and I also have one that is just all black. So that's the back side that you're looking
Yeah.
at right there.
And this is the other side
Mm-hmm.
is black. But I wanted to show them, and I'll tell you why, because some people, like some of my clients, are using like baby pads. Like they don't know where to get them. So they're getting like, or old people like those bed protectors, that you'd get for people who are sick that wet the bed. And
Yeah.
so they're not pretty like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I want to show you, like, it's not like anything else, it's fine and it's kind of sexy. And yeah, so you want to give her a shout out and check out her site and
And
make
then
sure that, oh,
the last
yes.
one, right? So these are blackout blindfolds. So this is actually laser etched. And then this one's been kind of beat up in my bag. I've been using it, but this is actually high, super soft, squishy foam. So when you actually put this thing on, right, like you can see how much it squishes. It's the same kind of stuff that you have inside ski goggles. And when you put it on, you can actually get it so that it blacks out all the way around, but your eyes can open. So if you've got big lashes, or you just like the weird sensory experience of like opening your eyes into total darkness, like it comes in any color. Just tell me what you want.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Did you want to show anything else, or were you good?
Like I've got I'll show you a couple other quick things. So
I think her stuff is really neat, don't you?
I love it. Basically, yeah, I got into making this stuff because there wasn't anything like it. These have been very much used lately. This is one of my favorites. So I like the things in antique brass, but you can see this just has a little bit of lace right around the edge. This is a cuff that snaps on, and the snaps are super strong. Like they're not going to come undone. They actually really hold. So like that would be a basic cuff. And then if you wanted something like, you're like, no, I want something like really that feels substantial. Any cuff I've got on my website can also be made in a wrap cuff style.
Nice.
So like that's the gold hardware, and then this one would buckle. So, and yeah, like if you wanted this in a whole collar, cuff, anklet, thigh cuff set, right?
And I guess you
I love
have
making
those.
sets.
I guess you have those circles so that you could actually like clasp something to it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If you want to
So
clasp on like a leash or something.
yes,
Ropes. You want
thank
to
you
put
for
ropes
like,
in it?
yeah, like you can put ropes in it. You can, I have tethers so that you can attach different things to it, attach it to like the bedpost or whatever. But yeah, so that you could put like two wrists together, you could put them behind the back, over the head. But this is like my favorite thing. It's not up on the website yet, but this is actually bungee.
Oh.
I don't know if you can really see how much that stretches.
Yep.
And so if you had this, tied to, an over the door hanger, and if you've got your arms up like this for a long time, eventually your shoulders start to get really worn out by that, and it gets uncomfortable, especially if you're stretched. But when something stretches, then you can actually get the blood flow back into the joint, into those muscles, into those tendons and ligaments, and be like secured in a position for much longer. And I just want to say also, people have this idea that like oh, getting tied up and whipped, or tied up and mean things done to you. You can also just get tied up and have incredible amounts of pleasure like put on you, and that's kinky too, right?
Yeah.
So like what do you want to get tied up for? Sure, you can do flogging or caning or spanking or paddling, yeah, but like what about incredible touches and like endless orgasms, like like all of it's possible.
What about that being tied up just so somebody can tease you and drive you crazy and never totally pleasure you for hours?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Like I said, I am mostly, like submissive. So like I would prefer to be tied up and stuff. But if my partner wants to be tied up, I'm not so good at providing pain things. Like I know how to do that, but it's not that interesting for me, to do spanking or flogging or whatever. That's not so interesting. But to like provide pleasure to the point of somebody like just it's gonna break their brain, like
right.
That's where I like to play, So, yep.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end it on play and on lovely things. So I hope that you all, if you have thoughts or comments or questions, leave them in the comments, because I know this is a recording, but we will get back to you. We will answer your questions if you leave them in the comments, because we care about you. We want you to be able to feel free to express yourself and to learn and grow. And remember, always be kind. There's no right and wrong. There's just our own thoughts and feelings and our own desires. All right. So I thank you again for watching, and thank you, Kismet. I'm really grateful that you were here. Wasn't that great, everybody? And have a great weekend.